Hello and happy Halloween. This is Kaylee. And you are probably wondering why you're looking at a editing software. Well, apparently there's a glitch right now with DaVinci Resolve and I cannot export anything without the whole system crashing. I've been trying for multiple days. So here is my last ditch effort. We're just going to screen record. So I hope you guys enjoy watching our Halloween episode and don't forget to vote who did the better pumpkin and who told you the better story. Let's begin. Welcome to Odd Matters, where all matters of the macabre are discussed. From hauntings to legends, plagues to disasters, we have it all right here. Welcome to our Halloween special!
Halloween! It's gonna be lovely as I drop my pumpkin.
If you were here for last year's Halloween special, you would know that Jack and I did a haunted personal stories battle where we told our own personal stories. You guys got to vote in the polls on who told the better story. And unfortunately, last year Jack beat me.
Really?
Yeah, he had a haunted Christmas tree, and I talked about Aunt Lynn's haunted creepy doll that went running across the ground.
Both are terrifying.
They're both terrifying, but he beat me because his also involved Krampusnacht.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was like, okay, yeah, I lost to Krampusnacht. So this year, though, we put an extra special twist on it. Not only are we telling you stories about our favorite Gothic authors, and you get to tell us who did the better history/author stories, but we're also doing a pumpkin painting competition. So I'm gonna let Izzy show her pumpkin first because mine has a comedy story behind it.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun with all the different ridges. So, yeah, alright, show your pumpkin. I wanna see.
So the story behind the pumpkin is originally I was going to go get a pumpkin from Walmart, and I missed the bus. The next bus wasn't going to be for 2 hours, and ain't nobody got time for that. So instead I went to Walgreens, and they didn't have normal pumpkins, but they had this pumpkin, and I got it for free.
What is it? Oh my god!
I'm using its back. This is my pumpkin, guy.
I love that! Oh, and you got it for free? Dang.
So this is my free pumpkin. I don't know what material it is, but this will probably take over my old pumpkin in the background.
I'm honestly surprised that pumpkin has lasted, because isn't that an actual pumpkin that we got?
No, it's plastic.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
No, it's been there for 2 years. It's plastic, spray painted black with hot glue to make the webbing going down. That was painted with a silver Sharpie. Still there.
Nice.
I'm creative and make shit up as I go. Alright, so you guys in the polls at the end will not only get to vote who has the better story about their author, but also who has the better pumpkin. So if y'all don't like me telling the life story of my personal favorite Gothic author, hopefully I can beat you guys. I can beat Izzy with my free pumpkin. That says
you probably will.
It's just a bunch of hocus pocus. I'm hoping my art degree comes in here. Okay. So, Izzy, would you like to go first or me?
I'll go first.
I get to start outlining a pumpkin.
Alright. So, this is my favorite Gothic author. Mary Godwin was born on the 30th of August, 1797, in London. 11 days after her birth, her mother, the celebrated author of A Vindication of the Rights of Women, published in 1792, died of a fever, leaving Godwin, the author of An Inquiry Concerning Political Justice, 1793, a widower, and to care for Mary as well as her 3-year-old half-sister, Fanny Emily. Godwin could find no words to articulate his grief at the loss of the woman whom he had been with for 13 months and fell passionately in love. In spite of their ethical opposition to the institution of marriage, he and Wollstonecraft had married only 5 months earlier in order to give their child social respectability. Mary was 4 years old when her father remarried to a woman who was not too fond of Mary. The woman, Jane Clairmont, moved in with her 2 children. When she gave birth to a 3rd child in 1803, Mary's alienation became amplified. She felt removed from her family as well as from her father's affections. When Mary grew into a teenager and began to act and look like her mother, Jane became fed up and sent her away for 2 years to Scotland. In her later writing, Mary described Scotland as bleak and dreary. But the bleak and boring days allowed her to begin creating fictional tales. In spite of her lack of excitement, she started to explore other identities in her imagination. In 1812, Mary returned to England to visit her father. During the trip, she met one Percy Shelley, a young poet her father had befriended and mentored. During this stay in England, Percy was accompanied by his wife, Harriet Westbrook. Despite Percy's marriage, he and Mary had an obvious interest in one another. When Mary returned to England in 1814 and saw Percy again, they swiftly fell in love. They ran away together to elope and travel around Europe, leaving Harriet, Percy's wife, heartbroken. Mary's father adamantly disapproved of their union, and it left him feeling very wounded. Besides the calamity that surrounded their relationship, Mary and Percy fell passionately for one another. Percy was a romantic poet who encouraged Mary to write. In 1815, Mary gave birth to her first daughter prematurely. The girl only lived 2 weeks before she died. Stricken with grief, the Shelleys moved to Bishopsgate, but Mary soon became pregnant again. In 1816, she gave birth to a son, William, whom she named after her father. 1816 was called the Year Without a Summer. The eruption of Mount Tambora caused a global catastrophe. Heavy smoke and volcanic ash disrupted the stratosphere, blocking the sunlight. The loss of sun caused cold temperatures, darkness, and food shortage around the world. During this gloomy season, the Shelleys traveled for a holiday at Lake Geneva. There they stayed with their friends, Lord Byron, Dr. John Polidori, and Mary's stepsister, Claire Clairmont. During their trip to Geneva, the group resided in the Villa Diodante and stayed up late discussing scary German ghost stories. At Lord Byron's suggestion, the friends competed in a competition of original ghost stories. However, in the end, Mary's was the most hauntingly successful and grew into the tale that we now know as Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. But as Mary set off to continue writing on the novel, she received news that her half-sister, Fanny, had committed suicide. Then, just 1 month later, the Shelleys heard that Harriet, Percy's former wife, had drowned herself at age 21. Notwithstanding her grief, Mary worked on the book for 2 more years. Frankenstein was published on New Year's Day in 1818. Though it should have been a happy time, death continued to follow Mary. In September, her youngest daughter died at 1 year old. In the following year, her son William died as well. All told, Mary had 5 children, with only one surviving, Percy Florence, named after her beloved and the city he was born. Despite his love for Percy Florence, Percy Shelley experienced chronic nervousness and panic attacks due to all the death in his life. During a dark spell in 1822, he traveled out onto a sailboat and drowned to death in a storm. After his death, Mary continued to write, but cycles of depression and sorrow kept her from it. From 1827 to 1840, Mary was able to write prolifically again. She worked as both a writer and an editor. She published several original works in those years and edited the writings of Percy Shelley and her father. In the 1840s, Percy Florence married a woman who Mary absolutely adored, so she was surrounded by loved ones as she aged. In 1851, Mary had died of a brain tumor. On the 1-year anniversary of Mary Shelley's death, Percy Florence opened her box desk. Inside, they found the locks of her dead children's hair, a notebook that she had shared with Percy Shelley, and a copy of his poem Adonis, with one page folded round a silk parcel containing some of his ashes and even the remains of his heart. And that is my favorite Gothic author, Mary Shelley, and I like to call her the mother of Gothic.
I love Mary Shelley. I remember my school made us read Frankenstein for, I want to say it was either junior or senior year. We had to read Frankenstein. And that was one of my favorite novels I ever read while in school. This is how far I am, by the way. I got eyes going. And some teeth. Mostly because I'm using the Sharpie for these. Everything else will be paint. So they glow. But, Mary Shelley was always one of my favorites. I remember when I was a kid, I learned about Frankenstein when I was like 8 or something. Mm-hmm. It was because there was this show on Discovery Kids that I used to love as a kid. Time Blazers. And they...
Yes, I remember that.
Someone else finally knows what Time Blazers is. Audience,
Look,
if you know what
Kids.
Time Blazers is, please leave a review that just says... F yeah, Time Blazers, so I know more people exist. I loved that show as a kid. And they did a whole episode on the writing of Frankenstein, how it was basically just, a bet. And I thought that was so cool. So, like, even before I read Frankenstein when I got older, because I was just too young to read it, when I first learned about it, I would not have been able to follow it. Not that it was too scary or anything, because my dad let me start watching Freddy Krueger when I was 7.
Yep.
So the horror wasn't the issue. My dad just knew I wouldn't be able to understand the writing, because it was just too advanced. So once I was old enough to understand the writing, I read Frankenstein and I loved it.
Yep, that is still, like, one of my favorite books. Like, if I cannot find anything else to read, I go to my Victorian, like, literature classics.
Yeah.
So it's either Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein, Dracula, all the classics.
Oh yeah, we gotta love our classics. Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites. I didn't know as much about her personal life. Like, the most I knew was about the bet and everything, and then that she knew Lord Byron, stuff like that, I had already known. I didn't know about her young life, how, like, her mom died, she had the stepmother who didn't like her, stuff like that. Which is pretty sad and everything, and that she was sent away. I knew she had a ton of kids that died, and I knew about the heart thing. Overall, she was pretty interesting, and I'm trying to remember, because, like, you and I both know, like, keeping locks of hair during this time, that's a normal occurrence. Because that's just a Victorian tradition, so that's not as big of a deal, but I can't remember if the keeping of the heart, I think even for them, that was a weird one.
I think that was just a personal Mary Shelley thing, because his heart was also cremated as well. So it's like she had his own ashes and I'm trying to figure out how they could guess it was still the heart unless it still was in the form of a heart. But still,
So wait, it was that when he was cremated, they took the heart out, cremated the heart separately from his body, and then gave her the heart cremations and the regular cremations?
Okay.
No, I'm asking.
That probably makes more sense. That's probably how they did it in the 1800s. Like, it was probably a special request.
It was, but, like, anything. I'm trying to, like you, I'm trying to understand, like, how did the son know just by going through his mom's belongings, like, oh, this is Dad's heart, if it was ashes. Unless it, like, specifically said Percy's heart or something.
I think maybe because it was wrapped with, like, the one-page copy of his poem, then maybe that was, like, a big tell that, okay, yeah, this is my father's heart. Dang, my mother was weird.
But wouldn't he just auto-assume not heart, but regular ashes? Like, what made him jump from ashes to heart? It had to have said it somewhere. That's the heart, right?
Yeah, it probably did. It just
either that, or we're like completely wrong, and that heart's in a fermentation jar, and we're just being dumb.
You know, it's Mary Shelley who wrote.
It could have been in formaldehyde. Formaldehyde was not that hard to get back then. You know, we might just be misunderstanding it, and it turns out, no, it wasn't cremated. It's just a formaldehyde jar with his heart in it, and I'll be like, oh.
And it would make sense.
Honestly, she's the person I'd be like, fitting.
Yes, and there have been a couple things that I've been seeing, or I was doing my research on how Mary Shelley, like, made love to Percy on her mother's grave.
I remember hearing that rumor, and I was like, I don't know if that's true or just, like, you know, weird rumors that were from the time, because women shouldn't be writers, yada yada yada.
Right, and also I found out her mother was actually very much a women's rights author and activist too, so.
Oh, that's cool. Maybe that's why the next one didn't like her too much. It's like, you're like your mother. You think women should have the right to vote.
Yes. Yes, exactly that, because in my findings I did find out that Jane Clairmont did not like the fact that Mary and her father would have these deep intellectual conversations. So yeah.
Maybe because her own daughter was too stupid to hold the conversation, so she was like, God damn it, why can't you be as smart as Mary? I fucking hate Mary. She's showing how bad I am at getting you to be smart.
Probably.
She probably just one-upped her stepsister too much that the mom was like, fuck you, Mary. And Mary's just like, what the fuck did I do?
You're too smart.
I can't help the fact that your child's a dumbass.
And I see you starting to paint, so I'm like, okay, let me get all my paint on the palette.
Unfortunately, my paint is the exact same color I just did the eyes.
I just realized my pumpkin is not going to have any sort of theme. It's just going to be colorful.
Oh, you're just doing, like, colors and everything?
Probably, because I never really... Because there's no way I can, like... I could probably draw a scene on it or something, but...
Yeah, just do a scene. You don't have to try to one-up me. I'm doing a face. If you couldn't tell by the eyeballs and the teeth, I'm doing a face. Alright, I just need a little orange so she doesn't blend into her eyeball. Hey, look, it looks like skin. There we go. Well, you see, normally to make skin, it's more than just two colors mixed, but this one actually worked pretty well.
Oh, that's good.
I'm about to start my story, I promise. I just needed to fix that because it was so ugly. There we go! Totally oh, it looks so orange, but you know, we'll take it. She's orange today, guys. Please don't blend into your earring now.
I'm taking advantage of me having my cat's cat tree in here, so I'm using that as like my shelf.
I'm so close to doing that, man. I'm telling the story of my personal favorite author, not only of Gothic literature, but just of all time.
Oh yeah.
And I think if anyone has been looking at my new background, they would know who it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I realized I need to get a picture of Mary Shelley to put in here.
Alright, I have finally finished the first layer of paint. We're really going to be going with the idea of trust the process for this painting. Because, my god, Does it look terrifying? So, who I will be talking about as my all-time favorite author. Um, if you look behind me, you will definitely see, because I have this lovely shirt behind me where he is hanging. I wore that shirt literally to the point where it can't be worn anymore, which is why it's hanging up and I'm not just wearing it.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, it's like falling apart. It's like going threadbare in some areas.
Okay, well, now I know what to get you for Yule.
Edgar Allan Poe was born Edgar Poe on January 19th, 1809, in Boston to his parents, traveling stage actors David and Eliza Poe. David Poe definitely left the family early. We don't know exactly when he left. Some sources say he was around until Eliza's death. Others say he left before Eliza's death. Either way, Poe, by the age of 3, was left without either of his parents. He then was separated from his siblings. His older brother, William, who was called Henry, went to go live with their grandparents. His younger sister, Rosalie, ended up being adopted by the Mackenzie family, and Edgar was sent to live with the Allen family, John and Frances Allen of Richmond, Virginia. This is where Poe would live for most of his life. The Allens never officially adopted Edgar, but when he was baptized, the name he was given was Edgar Allan Poe. And as he grew older, he would keep using Edgar Allan for a lot of his schooling. From 1815 to 1820, the Allen family moved to England, where Edgar went to a boarding school and he was taught the normal classics of the early 1800s. He learned, normal math, literature, and some humanist teachings such as Latin, Greek, and dancing. In 1826, Edgar got accepted into the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. This school was actually founded by Thomas Jefferson just the year before. So he was going to be one of their first graduating classes, essentially. But he kind of made this unfortunate decision, which I don't know, maybe some of us have made. He moved all the way to Charlottesville thinking that he had enough for tuition. The $110 he had, which, my God, I wish tuition was still $110. It turned out to be, 3 times that. But honestly, if I had to pay $330 for tuition, I would be really happy. But Edgar didn't have $330, so he decided the best option, because he was too low on money, was to gamble to up his money. So he went from having $110 to negative $2,000 very quickly. And then he had to call up John Allen, and he and John got into a very bad dispute. He didn't really talk to John Allen that much after that. It's going to come back in a little bit, being a little bit sad. Also, during this time, Edgar had his very first fiancée. Her name was Elmira Royster. She was his childhood love. She loved him back. They were very fond of each other. She promised to wait and marry Edgar when he got back from not Richmond, they're in Richmond, from Charlottesville. That they were going to get married. But very soon after he left, only about 6 months later, and he had to return to Baltimore because he was $2,000 in debt. He found out that Elmira was engaged to Alexander B. Shelton because her father disapproved of Edgar, said he wasn't going to go anywhere with his life, and he liked Alexander Shelton because he was already a wealthy businessman. So Edgar lost his first love. After this kind of feud with his foster father, the loss of his first fiancée, Edgar joined the army under the name Edgar A. Perry. I don't know why he went under a different last name instead of Poe. I couldn't really find any sources that said why he did. He wrote his very first book, Tamerlane, and other poems during his time in the army. This one might not be as well known because it was posted under the name of Bostonian instead of under his actual name. This is his only one that he released under not being his real name. While he's in the army, Frances Allen, his foster mother, dies in Richmond. There's a slight debate on what she died from, just kind of like there's a slight debate with what killed his birth mother. But it is believed that both women died from tuberculosis. Allen, I don't know exactly how old she was when she died, but I can tell you that Eliza Poe was 24 when she died. Remember that number. Or remember that age, I should say. Poe gets released from the army. He doesn't really handle the death of Frances Allen that well. And he decides he wants to go to West Point, which for our non-American viewers is a very famous school here in the States for military. It's a military school. And he was accepted into West Point. He wrote his second book while he was in West Point called Al-Araf, Tamerlan, and Minor Poems. This one was published under his name. John Allen remarries only about a year and a half at max. He remarries to Louisa Patterson, and they have 3 kids together. By only 1 year after entering West Point, Poe's tired of West Point. He doesn't want to be there anymore, so his decision to get out of being at West Point is just not to go to classes and not to go to church. And that's why he got kicked out of West Point, is he said, I'm not going to church. So he was court-martialed for not going to church or classes. I think that's funny.
That is hilarious.
The same year he gets court-martialed and kicked out of West Point for not going to church, he writes his second set of stories, which is just called Poems. Very original title. He hasn't gone to his really big stage yet. While Edgar moved over to New York after getting out of West Point, he lives with his aunt and her daughter, Virginia, who is Edgar's cousin. And this is reportedly the happiest time in Edgar's life. He seems to be very mentally stable. He's able to get a lot done. And this is when he's focused on sending out all his short stories to different contests, 5 of which do get published, but they're published as viewer submission, not by Edgar Allan Poe. This is also where he gets to win his first $50 prize for Message Found in a Bottle from the Baltimore Saturday Visitor. Unfortunately, during this time, 2 major deaths happen in Edgar's life. The first, in 1831, his older brother Henry dies in Baltimore from, you guessed it, tuberculosis. This is now his possibly 3rd death from tuberculosis. The next year, in 1834, John Allen, Poe's foster father, dies in Virginia as well. He did not leave any of his extremely large estate to Edgar. He omitted Edgar from his will, most likely from that argument they had over the $2,000 in debt. After this, Poe moves back down to Richmond, but he also brings Virginia and his aunt down with him, and they all live together. Only a year after moving back down so that Poe can work at the Southern Literary Messenger, he marries Virginia. So their ages at this time, it's really iffy, and apparently even during this time, people were like, that's a little questionable. Poe was 27 and Virginia was 13. Yeah, it's questionable, and a lot of the sources even were like, yeah, contemporaries found it weird. And I'm like, wow, this is like 1836, and they're like, this is weird. I was very surprised to hear that one. Apparently, they actually had a really good marriage. They didn't really have any kids or anything, so some people started where they just married on paper for some reason, or what's going on with these people. After he leaves Southern Literary Messenger in 1837, Poe, Virginia moved back up to New York, bringing his aunt slash mother-in-law with them. And then they moved to Philadelphia the year after. Now his actual short stories and novels are starting to get published during this time. His narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, the chronologist's first book, they're both published in the late 1830s. He also becomes the editor for the Gentleman's Magazine. His Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque are published in Philadelphia. And I found this one funny. In 1840, he writes the Journal of Julius Rodman, and he publishes it as 4 installments in the magazine he edits, Gentleman's Magazine. But people mistook it as an actual, expedition someone went on. And so they were cited in a document that was submitted to the U.S. Senate as evidence of this expedition. It was just Edgar Allan Poe's short story. I thought that was hysterical. During this time, he's having a lot of good luck. He's publishing all these things. A cool fact that I actually didn't realize, even though I'm a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan, is he wrote the first modern detective story that inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to write Sherlock Holmes. And Doyle actually cites Poe as his inspiration to write Sherlock Holmes. And that is The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was released in 1841. So I thought that was a really cool thing that I didn't realize. He also, during this time, wrote a bunch of short stories, but they were not horror. He was actually known at that time as a comedy writer. I know, I'm just like, Poe wrote... What? Poe wrote comedy and I got a cat on my lap. Thanks, buddy. Thanks. In 1845, this is when Poe arguably writes his most famous poem. It's still studied in schools today. It is the first thing people think of if you say Edgar Allan Poe. That's The Raven. He wrote The Raven in 1845, and it was published in the New York Evening Mirror. And you want to know how much money he made for it? $15. One of the most famous poems. The author only was given $15. And the comical part is that poem put him on the map in his own lifetime, and he still only made $15. But because of The Raven, he was able to then... The cat is sitting on my lap and pulling my head down. Oh, God. Because of The Raven, he was one of the very first authors who was able to live purely on his writing alone. So I thought that was a really awesome feat. He then, later that year, he wrote The Raven and other poems. Because, if you're going to try to get the rest of your stuff published, put that big one that put you on the map on the cover and be like, and my other works, so I do more than just this one thing about ravens. Poe's luck changes in 1847. Virginia gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. This is also when Poe wrote The Masque of the Red Death. It was completely inspired by Virginia's bout of tuberculosis, and it was his way of working through her slow death. She died in 1847, and after that, Poe was never the same again. He kind of starts to go on a spiral down pretty quickly. He definitely falls into severe drinking habits. He actually gets to start dating a fellow poet during this time named Sarah Helen Whitman. But he's also an alcoholic during this time, and she says she won't marry him unless, he becomes sober. He does not do that, and so the wedding is called off after only a month or two because of how much he was drinking. So after all this, he's still spiraling. He returns to Richmond, Virginia in 1849, where he finds Elmira. If you remember, I talked about Elmira at the very beginning. they rekindle their relationship and they actually get engaged again. And this time they plan on actually marrying each other. And it's very sweet. The weird thing, though, is that within her former husband's will, he straight up wrote that if she ever remarried, all of the inheritance she was given is gone. She has to stay a widow if she wants the money, because he was a rich guy. So she willingly gives up all the money so that she can marry Edgar. And I thought that was sweet.
That is sweet.
So then, before he can fully move down back to Richmond to marry Elmira, who was that first love he had before he married Virginia, he has to go do some stuff up in New York. He's planning on bringing his former mother-in-law, Virginia's mom, and his aunt down to Richmond to stay with him so that he can still take care of her, because he called her Ma because he was very close to her and everything. So he still wanted to care for her even though Virginia was gone and he was marrying someone else. While in Baltimore, though, something happens to Poe. He was found on October 3rd in a tavern called Gunner's Hall in Baltimore. He possibly was drunk or severely delirious. He was wearing someone else's clothes, and he was unable to remain conscious. So he was brought to Washington University Hospital, where for 4 days he was just in and out of consciousness. He would occasionally be lucid and talking to people, but other times just screaming. And they couldn't figure out why, and he passed away on October 7th of 1849. The cause of death is listed as phrenitis, which during this time, phrenitis or inflammation of the brain was what they would list on any death certificate for cause of death unknown. So to this day, no one is actually sure what Edgar Allan Poe died of. And according to the Poe Museum, there have been over 26 published theories on what killed Edgar Allan Poe. I forgot to say earlier, remember how I told you, that his mother died at the age of 24 from tuberculosis?
Mm-hmm.
Virginia died at the age of 24 from tuberculosis. That's why I wanted you to remember that, because I thought that was a weird coincidence.
That is a weird coincidence.
So, one thing that you probably noticed I said a lot is a lot of the women in his life died from tuberculosis. Even his brother died from tuberculosis, and it seemed like this followed him around. I remember hearing once, I couldn't find it today for this episode, that for a while there was this theory that he might have been a carrier of tuberculosis. So if you are the carrier of a disease, you have it within you, you can infect others, but you yourself are not infected. Which I could see kind of making sense, except the first one to die was his mother, unless she was the one who infected him by the age of 2. And until he was the age of 40, when he died, he's always just been a carrier. That could be a possibility, but it sounds like him and his brother were never around each other. And his brother still died. And also, his foster mother, Frances, died while he was in the army. He wasn't even near her. So the only ones he was around who died from tuberculosis were Virginia and his mother. So that's why at first I thought maybe he could have been a carrier, but after looking at the history and everything and the actual timeline, I do not believe he was a carrier. It was a very unfortunate time. This was the early 1800s. Everyone had death happening around them. And he just, unluckily, a lot of them were tuberculosis around him. I also found out that before he died, only a few days or weeks before, he had just recovered from his own bout with cholera before he went on that trip up to Baltimore where he died. So I think that probably had a little bit to do with him dying too. And that is the story of my favorite author, Edgar Allan Poe. And now I get to do the next layer on this goddamn terrifying face. So what's your thoughts on what I said, Izzy?
Okay, so basically, I knew Virginia was his cousin, and
Mm-hmm. Did you know the age difference number?
I knew the age difference, and I heard, like, I don't know if if it was a rumor or if it was actual fact, but the reason why he married her and she was so young is because he wanted to save her from marrying someone who was an abusive a-hole, basically. Like, the mother was arranging a marriage for her, but he found out the guy was up to no good. And he's like, you know what, let me just marry her. And that's why it just was like marriage on paper in a way.
That would make more sense because, like, even the sources of the day were kind of confused on the marriage.
Yeah.
Like, let me re-find the one that, one of the earlier ones I found. Here we go. This is quoted from the Poe Museum. Soon after Poe joined Southern Literacy Messenger, he and White began to have issues, the root of which perhaps came from Poe's drinking. Poe invited his aunt and cousin, Maria and Virginia, to live with him in Richmond. 1 year later, Poe and Virginia then got married. She was 13, he was 27. This is an unlikely pairing, and there's much debate about the nature of their relationship. Poe often referred to Virginia as Sissy and Maria as Muddy, which is just a short form of mother. Although many people today presume their relationship was familial, we ultimately will never know what happened in their marriage behind closed doors. Virginia and Maria had a stabilizing effect on Poe. He seemed to be more responsible and happier during the years when they were with him.
And I want to say either Virginia inspired Lenore or Annabelle Lee. I can't remember which one. Wait,
Yeah.
Annabelle Lee was the childhood love.
Yeah, I think Annabelle Lee was childhood love because it's like, I'm losing my Annabelle Lee or something like that.
Yes.
And then Lenore was the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, I think that's why he was willing to, like, remarry so fast after. But they did say he was never the same after Virginia died. And I think it's because of just that closeness he had with her and everything. Like, even if he was not romantically attracted to his wife, they definitely had a connection.
Yes.
And they never had kids, so I think that means they might not have been having a sexual relationship.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there was no such thing as birth control during this time, and also during this time you wanted to have the kids.
Right.
So I'm like, I think they just weren't a physical couple. Or as you said, he did it to protect her, not because he wanted to be with his cousin.
Right. Steady fingers, steady fingers. I want this to actually look like an A.
Oh, you're writing on yours?
Yeah, because one of my favorite quotes from Frankenstein is "Beware, I am fearless." There, Lord. Fuck.
Man, you're so good at your favorite quote, man.
Beware, I am fearless. Therefore, I am powerful.
There you go. I was going to paint Edgar Allan Poe on the pumpkin, but then when all I could get was a Hocus Pocus pumpkin, I had to switch gears.
I'm surprised. I'm curious to see who you switched gears to.
Yeah, because I was just going to keep doing him on the back of the pumpkin, but then I was like, it'll look really fucking weird. Because it's a very clearly Hocus Pocus themed pumpkin to have Edgar Allan Poe on its back.
But it's you, so it would have been on brand anyway.
It could have been on brand, you are right, but I decided to switch it up. And keep on brand of the pumpkin, not on brand of me. So right now it looks terrifying. It looks very terrifying, but you know, the thing about painting is you trust the process.
You just gotta trust the process, and that's what I'm doing with this, because I'm trying to do the heart in a jar.
Oh yeah, so you're trying to do a little bit of figurative drawing, and I'm just trying to make this not look ungodly ugly.
Like, look, I got a castle, a quote, Now I got a heart in a jar.
So I think right now we're just gonna have like free talk because neither of us are anywhere near ready to present.
Oh yeah, no.
Uh, we both went through our history. So you know what? What we're gonna talk about? What is our favorite story by our preferred author?
Okay.
So since you told your story first, do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right. What's your favorite story by Mary Shelley?
Obviously Frankenstein.
Did she write anything else?
I know she's written other works, but that one's just a surprisingly cozy favorite of mine. And no one would ever think you'd hear cozy and Frankenstein in the same sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a cozy one because I honestly really like the story, and I wrote so many papers in high school about Frankenstein because I just loved it. I even did like a comparing paper between Frankenstein and Eric from Le Phantom de l'Opera.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I remember it was like, were the men in the story Frankenstein's monster and Eric the villains, or did society, like, were they always a villain, or did society make them a villain? So I remember that was one of my favorite papers I wrote.
Nice. And honestly, I think it's society that made them monsters. So I'm just like, I'm sure that's definitely what you had in your paper. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, I wrote
agreeing
that
with you.
like they both had the option to be not maniacs based off of like early parts of the book. You can tell they had the option to be productive members of society, but because of how society reacted to just how they physically looked, they were denied the chance, and so they treated society the way society treated them, which of course meant that they were a monster, because that's what society had already deemed them to be. But yeah, I love rereading Mary Shelley. And she just does really well with like her descriptions of like the human aspect of the monster,
Yes.
and him just being like, I'm not a monster. You're the one who made me, so if I'm a monster, what's that make you?
Exactly.
Like, you made me to look like this. So if I'm a freak, that's your own goddamn fault. You could have made me not a freak.
It makes sense that technically Frankenstein would be considered like our very first example of science fiction.
Yeah. Oh, I also remember when I was reading, Edgar Allan Poe also wrote science fiction.
Yeah, he did, huh?
Yeah, but he is mostly known as a comedy and horror writer. Which I'm just like, how is it I've gone my whole life loving Edgar Allan Poe, but I have never found an example of his comedy writings?
I was about to say, I don't know any of his comedy.
Yeah, I'm like, I kind of feel like this is now going to be my goal. Listeners, if you ever, like, come across any of his, like, comedy writing, please send it my way. You can send it to our email at macabremattersofficial@gmail.com, because I want to read this man's version of a comedy, because I'm so curious what it is.
I feel like it would be very... Why do I feel like he'd have a very sarcastic and dark sense of humor? Well, dark kind of comes with the territory, but sarcastic, yes.
Yeah, like, I'm pretty sure he's gonna be, like, either sarcastic or just straight up sardonic personality, yeah. And I'm like, I would love to read that. My favorite by Edgar Allan Poe, actually, like, is probably one of the very first ones I was ever exposed to when I was a kid, and so it kind of just lives with me the best. It's actually Fall of the House of Usher.
Ooh, yeah, that is a good one.
Like, I love The Raven, I love Mask of Red Death, I make my students read Mask of Red Death. I also made them read, like, Cast of Amontillado and everything. Like, I love all of his short stories and everything. But Fall of the House of Usher was like the first one I was exposed to, and it was kind of like the one that just lived in my mind the best.
Yeah, that's a good one. One of my favorites is the Tall Tale Heart.
That's a good one too, yeah. Cask of Amontillado. I still believe Cask of Amontillado inspired this song that I heard when I was a kid by like this country artist called A Little Too Late. Cause
Oh
like
my
in the
God.
video, have you seen that song?
I think I have. I
It's
think
like
so.
he's singing to his wife. He's like, "It's a little too late. I'm a little too gone, a little too tired of just hanging on." And the entire time he's like putting up a fucking brick wall to like brick her into their basement. She's just sitting there like glaring at him and scoffing and being like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And you're like, "Why the fuck is this woman so chill?" And then you find out at the end he accidentally boarded himself up into the basement. She just walks out, and it was really funny. And like, so whenever I read Cask of Amontillado, that song just plays in my head the whole time. So for me, Cask of Amontillado is an unintentional comedy because of that music video. Let's do a check-in on how our pumpkins are coming.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
The light's terrible. Let me see. There you go. I mean, you can tell who it is now.
I can tell who it is now, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's still on brand for you as well.
Of course I'll have a Winifred one. My head wrap is going into the paint, so let's just wrap that around my head. I'll now look like Professor Quirrell. Troll in the
There's a troll
dungeon!
in the dungeon.
Troll in the dungeon!
I just thought you ought to know. Oh.
Like this, the music video is what made that song never leave my brain as a kid. And now, because as I got older, I then read Cask of Amontillado, and I thought it was just really fucking funny, because I'm like 99% sure this is inspired by Cask of Amontillado.
Oh yeah.
Like, what if, the main character was just a dumbass?
Possibly.
Because that's what I think it was meant to be. It's like, but what if Cask of Amontillado was stupid?
Was dumb. What if he was dumb?
What if he thought the best solution was to try this, and instead of the dude dying of a heart attack because he's getting closed in, he realizes his friend's a fucking moron.
Yes.
And he lives. Unfortunately, the ridges in the pumpkin are making this eye really hard to do.
Yeah, try doing a lightning bolt on the ridges.
I feel like that would be easier because those are like a little bit more organic. Mine have to be symmetrical.
It's okay if she got a lazy eye.
And then after we're done our pumpkins, after the stream, I'm also going to include pictures at the very end to help you guys vote on who is your favorite, so you can see it from all angles much better than on this video camera.
Yes.
AK, I don't think I'm gonna finish it in time. So that I can actually have something to show.
And I'm actually done.
Holy shit.
I'm like, okay, there's no more room on my pumpkin to do anything else.
Oh shit, I forgot who for iconic blush.
How can you forget her blush?
No, I'm not. Listeners, go look up A Little Too Late by Toby Keith and see if you too agree that it is inspired by Edgar Allan Poe.
I feel like we need to have a link of that in our description when we post it.
I will.
Hey, if you want an earworm, here you go.
Here's the earworm that we really believe is... Oh god, I just got fucking eyeball all over the goddamn thing. No! No! Shit! You know, maybe she's into that kawaii style where the blush goes up to your eyeballs. So while we're finishing up our pumpkins, and by we I mean me, because I know I'm the only one not done.
You very much look like Professor Quirrell.
Trump! Thought you ought to know.
Oh my god.
And that's gonna be a great joke that people are just like me when I wear my head wrap. And it's just gonna be a picture of Professor Quirrell. So I think we reached the point for our pumpkins for at least this video. We will post pictures with our pumpkins actually finished. Mostly because I have to go get another color because I don't actually have the right color.
Oop.
For her iconic clothing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I need to go get green. So we can laugh at the atrocity that is my pumpkin. And hopefully by the time you guys see the images, I have updated it. And you guys can vote who made not only the better story of their favorite author, but who had the better pumpkin. I don't think I'm winning for pumpkin, because my god, Winnie, you did not want to go on this pumpkin.
I got maybe just a suggestion since it seemed like it had paint on it.
Yeah.
Like, just for future reference, take some sandpaper and just kind of...
Yeah, I wasn't thinking when I first started about the fact that I should have sanded it. Because I knew to sand it. That was something I knew I was supposed to do. I just did it. Like a dumbass. And I'm gonna de-quirl myself. So, hold up your lovely pumpkin. Ignore her ugly ass hand. But hey, most of her is able to be seen.
Yeah.
She doesn't look utterly atrocious right now. She has eyeballs in the lips. She does have teeth, but they're through silver Sharpie. So I'm waiting for everything else to dry down, and I will do a second layer of silver Sharpie. And then her teeth will stand out too.
Yeah. I'm just spinning mine around.
Where's the better light? Where is the better light? Is it back here? There you go. Better light.
Ooh, nice.
Kind of better.
We got Frankenstein Castle, the Eye of the Monster, and Percy's Heart in a Jar.
I love it. So you guys vote. Who made the better pumpkin? Is it Winifred or Mary Shelley? I forgot words. I will now post pictures on top of our faces now for you guys to see some better images of our pumpkins. All right. I don't think I have any final comments. Izzy, do you have any final comments?
I am good. I just hope everyone has a happy and safe Halloween or Samhain, whichever.
Happy Halloween / Samhain, everyone. And Izzy, take us out.
Thank you for listening to Macabre Matters. This episode was written and hosted by me, Izzy, and
Kaylee.
My research was sourced from the British Library, a Mary Shelley biography, and Mary Shelley's Haunting Life by Caroline Macon Fisher.
And my sources were from American Masters Edgar Allan Poe Buried Alive documentary, the Poe Museum, as well as edgarallanpoe.org, and finally the National Library of Medicine National Center for Biotechnology Information.gov.
If you have enjoyed listening to us, please give the show a review and share with your friends. If you have any questions or comments, email us at macabremattersofficial@gmail.com. Also, if you want to get to know us better, please follow us on Instagram at Macabre Matters Official, Threads at Macabre Matters Official, YouTube at Macabre Matters Podcast. Like us on Facebook at Macabre Matters, or visit our new website at macabrematterspodcast.com. You can also join our Discord server where you can talk and hang out with us. All links are in the description. Music you are listening to is original music by Kevin Bowen.
And before
Thank
we
you.
leave,
Have
don't
the light.
forget to listen to the podcast on anywhere you listen to your podcast, because Stitcher and Google Podcasts are no longer going to exist. So look for us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you can find us. And write reviews, please. Leave us reviews.
Please write us all the reviews. Tell us how much you like us. Tell us how much
You can
love
even
listening
say
to
how
us.
much you don't like us or you don't like my pumpkin.
It's a cute
Anything.
pumpkin.
If you do reviews through Apple, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever the hell it's called now, it just helps us appear more in the algorithm. So we would love
Yes.
it if you would do that. And don't forget to vote in the polls. Who did the better story? Izzy on Mary Shelley, me on Edgar Allan Poe, and who did the better pumpkin? Izzy's Mary Shelley pumpkin or my Winifred Sanderson pumpkin that looks like a nightmare?
She just needs a little work done. It's fine.
She needs
just
a
has
little,
to suck up another
little
child's
bit of
soul.
outlining. Right now she got no outline, so she also has no nose.
Oh gosh. All right.
I combined Winifred Sanderson with Voldemort.
Was bad enough. Oh, funny enough, you're already dressed as Coral.
Troll in the dungeon! And we hope you have a delightfully grim evening.
Good night.
Bye! Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone has a happy and safe Halloween. Good night.